We value our full-time year-round residents just as much as we value our visitors, and we value our high-end luxury residents, and there needs to be a place for us too. And that's really at the heart of what Cold Smoke is trying to accomplish, is carve out a spot that will be permanently always reserved. This entire 100 acres is set aside for workforce. No short-term rental allowed, no part-time residency allowed. It can't be your second home, it can't be your vacation home. If that's what you're looking for, there's lots of places around Big Sky for you to be able to do that. This is set aside specially for locals. An apartment component and a single-family home component. So for the apartments, we're doing 264 studio, one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments. Every home on the entire property will be restricted for Big Sky workforce and have some affordability component associated with it. And then for the homes, will be a combination of detached and attached homes, and they're going to be one bedroom, two bedroom, and three bedroom. And we're targeting to sell those from $475,000 to $650,000. But that's the challenge. The building costs as high as they are.
Totally. Actually, on the note of investment, I'm not totally understanding of all the financial components, but
it's complicated.
It
took us several years.
Writing major, not finance, but I saw that the Big Sky resort tax went through. Did that help with funding at all for you guys?
Tremendously, and that's for projects like this in most other communities. Quite often they start with the municipality, the city or the county, providing some land to the project, because municipalities tend to accumulate land over years. So if we can take the land and the infrastructure being the roads and utilities and water pipes and electricity and so on, if we can take that out of the building equation that goes into what people pay for their house, we can effectively reduce the building cost of that home by 25 to 35%. So in Big Sky, because we're not incorporated, as an incorporated community. So there's not a city at Big Sky. We're within Gallatin County, so there is no locally owned land like Bozeman has. Many of the affordable projects you see in Bozeman, if not all of them, if you read the description, it'll start with on land provided by the city of Bozeman. That option wasn't here in Big Sky. So for us to achieve the same effect, what we have to do is buy the land and buy the retail, because there is no publicly owned land locally. Like we're surrounded by federally owned land and state lands, which we would never in a million years want to touch or change or get into. That's a big part of what makes Big Sky so special. But within the community, if we can achieve that same effect, that has a drastic impact on what people will pay for these homes. So as an alternative, what Big Sky does have is a local option sales tax that's called resort tax. And Montana law allows for communities whose visitation really exceeds their population, right? Like that would be Big Sky, Red Lodge, West Yellowstone, even Craig, Montana, Whitefish, communities that look like that, where there's so much of a strain on local services that's caused by the visitor economy. State law allows for a local tax that's primarily targeted towards visitors, so it's on hotel rooms and lift tickets and restaurants and those types of things that visitors tend to buy. And in Big Sky, that tax ends up being paid by a little bit over 90% by visitors as opposed to residents. So even though sales taxes do impact residents as well, by targeting what that tax is assessed on and trying to focus it on things that visitors buy, right, we're able to sort of make that tax paid by the visitor economy. And so by leveraging those funds, and we did that by a bond, which is basically a loan against resort tax collections, and that by state law that requires a public vote. So last May, we went to the public and said, would you approve allowing us to incur debt against resort tax collections, again, primarily paid by visitors as opposed to property taxes, which is what pays for most of this stuff otherwise. Would you allow us to leverage $60 million of debt to purchase 100 acres of land and then install all the infrastructure on it? And that vote was approved in May. So between May and January 7th, we were hard at work making everything happen that needs to happen to make that a reality. But that's what the news release was referring to, was January 7th. We consummated that transaction. And the Housing Trust, on behalf of the Big Sky community, now owns 100 acres of land. And the funds to install the infrastructure on that. So the infrastructure work will begin ironically, I say as soon as weather allows. And these will be the homes.
Okay.
So as you can see, this is already on this side of the stream. This is flat already. So that's why we're going to be able to start on this a lot sooner.
Yeah.
For this, we need to build this bridge. We need to build this road. We need to build all these roads.
Yeah.
We need to run electricity and water and all of those things into there. But that will be the main entrance. You'll come in here, go behind the apartments, and then down into here. And then there's a second entrance that you'll be able to access. This road kind of comes back up to the spur road up here.
Yeah.
And so there'll be sort of loop roads, 2 entrances in and out. The homes are arranged, the single family homes, in, we call them hamlets, or kind of pods, sort of like there's 6, 8, or 10 homes kind of in each little area. And this does a few things. It allows us, it really lends itself to building in phases, which is the tactic that we're going to use. But then it also provides for a living experience that's sort of like neighborhoods within neighborhoods. So we're trying to be really intentional about not only what those homes are, but what it's like to live there. It's a really special site. Real estate agents in Big Sky for years and years have always sort of said, well, a Lone Peak view adds $1 million to your home price, right? Well over half and almost 3/4 of these homes have a Lone Peak view, have these home sites. So what we're also trying to accomplish here is the site itself is kind of right in the middle of town. There's substantial trail access through the site, but also you can see like these trails, this is part of the greater Big Sky Trail network. So one of the goals we'll be able to accomplish is if you live here and you work in town center, for example, you can ride your bike to work all on dirt the entire time without encountering a car by sort of going this way.
And you mentioned the price point as well, and we went over that a little bit earlier, but how was it using that same sort of tool that helped you align the prices of this with maybe the actual wages for local workers versus people who...
Yes, it is exactly that.
Okay.
So we gather as much data as we can about what are locals making, because then that goes into the formula that says what can they afford. We use a rule that's kind of used nationwide. We lovingly call it the 30% rule, right? And that says that a household in America shouldn't really spend more than 30% of their gross household income on their housing cost, whether that's rent or a mortgage payment. That's the standard against which that's what we would define as affordable, right? So we say, okay, if a given income, a household income, right? If you and your partner together make $140,000, we run the math on that. What is 30% of that? How does that translate to a mortgage payment? And then that spits out, okay, for that household that's making that income, here's what they can afford to pay if we adhere to the 30% rule. And that's kind of the basis of how that math works for us, and that's how we establish those targets. Now, even with the land purchase, there's a pretty substantial gap between what it costs to build in the Gallatin Valley versus what those numbers return. And that's where we seek additional financing from philanthropy. Our local community foundations from the Yellowstone Club and Moonlight and Spanish Peaks are very strong supporters of the community in general, but especially of housing. And we're working very closely with them. Once our math gets more refined and we understand exactly what that gap is, then we will look to our local philanthropic, any other grant revenue that we can find, and so on, to be able to achieve those price points. So that's the challenge. 191 is never going to be a 4-lane road, just because of the geography and the topography of following the river. That has really gotten about as much improvement as will fit on that road. So because we're building really to jobs that already exist, right? This isn't designed for growth. We need more housing for that. This is designed to house people that are already working here.
Yeah.
So theoretically, 80% of the people that would live here are commuting up the canyon today. And so it's a traffic reduction measure.
So do you see any other possible adverse environmental effects of such like construction and whatnot? Or any worries that you have?
Any construction on vacant land certainly is disruptive, so we are very concerned about forestry and fire protection first and foremost. That is primary in any conversation about any work we're doing on here. That's always first. Proximity to the water course is right up there as well. I think those are our two most major concerns that we want to be extremely sensitive to at every single step of the process. We're very cognizant of where we live. We all live here for a reason. The last thing anybody that would potentially live in these homes or have anything to do with building them wants to do is denigrate any of those values that we have on there. So
Totally.
those are, I think, the biggest concerns that we would have is forestry / fire protection and proximity to the water course, and that's what we're going to be watching most closely.